Off you go. That's right, go away. Yeah. But can I add to that too, that in terms of when you talk about healthy sexuality, I think that's an interesting term, because it's like when people talk about family values. Well, I have a family and I have values. You know, we all do, presumably. And what do we think is healthy sexuality? One of the strong things I would say is, rather than just always focusing our attention on advertising and so on, I want to see much better sex education for young people in high schools, which is not just about what, you know, put a condom on. I'd like to see girls taught about their clitoris, if I'm allowed to say that on TV, and so taught about their own pleasure, and also taught about the emotional aspects of relationships, and not just in a way that says you're a bad girl if you give it out, but rather making them feel at an appropriate age comfortable.
Warren Brown, what do you make of these images of sexualisation of young girls?
Well, Jeff, I disagree to some degree of the last comment there. It's a difficult thing for parents, I guess, to discuss with their children. Here's a parent talking to his child, and he's saying to her, I want to talk to you about sex in the media. And she says to him, sit down and I'll explain it to you. And then I had another idea here, which has an advertising type, if you like, and he's there, and he's got his camera set up, and here's a young girl, and he's saying, it might be risque, sexy and titillating, but it's hardly exploitation.
Very good.
Thanks, mate.
Well, we're hearing that advertisers and marketers claim that they're only reflecting modern society's mood and just responding to what people want. But what about the young people themselves, girls in particular, who are troubled by some of these images they're confronted with, and they're confused about who they are and even what we expect them to be? Catherine Lumby, what about those children that we can be clear are very mixed up about this?
Well, we're talking about children or young women, as in early teenagers. Because one of the things I did a 3-year federally funded research project on teenage girls. And what was interesting about them, because they're in a very different category to children, was they are very savvy media consumers, I can tell you. And anyone who's got a teenage daughter in this audience will know what I'm talking about, because they can be very harsh critics of everything, including the media. And one of the things that was very clear is that while they're aware of this pressure to conform and so on, and the kind of the way the media makes them feel surveyed, they also feel that pressure from parents and educators and psychologists who pop up in the media talking about them. So one of the things that gives me great hope about young women is that they talk a lot, they debate this stuff. And again, my solution would be to encourage that debate, to encourage young women and empower them to speak out, not just to assume that they are empty pages that I guess men will want to write on.
Alan, is this an area we could find some common ground tonight? Because the American Psychological Association actually went to your field, media studies, and said if those young girls were, especially in high school, trained to be able to decode the messages, they would be more in control, rather than just being the targets of advertisers and marketers.
Yeah, I mean, we have been teaching school children media literacy for over 20 years now. And I think it's also true what Catherine's saying, that along with the formal education, you do have the fact that particularly the young teenagers we're talking about here are very capable of thinking for themselves. As Catherine says, if you've ever tried to get a 14-year-old to do something, you'll know that they're not just doing what they're told. They're actually quite difficult to manage, as it were. I mean, I'd be interested as well. I mean, Louise and Lee will know more about this than I do, but from the age of 4 or 5 onwards, the research shows children start to distinguish between fantasy and reality on television. And that process takes a long time to develop, up to the pubescent times, but they're already making those distinctions from the age of 4 and 5.
Louise, are they that clear about this?
Look, I think they're starting to reflect on those sorts of issues, but I think this debate needs to be very clear that there's a big difference between adolescents and what adolescents can manage and how we could maybe help support them understand media and become media savvy, and there's a lot of work obviously being done in that area, and children. Children of 4, 5 and 6 are now consumers and they're very vulnerable. So I think there has to be a more rational debate. And as always, of course, there's individual variation and children develop at different rates, but we have, I think, a responsibility to protect young children and not impose upon them an adult version of sexuality. And to take you up on a point you made before, when you said that the media reflects what's happening in popular culture.
Didn't say that.
Obviously, to a
Didn't
certain
say
extent
that,
it does,
no.
but it also creates.
Yeah, no.
I mean, I think, obviously, and as a media theorist, you know, I mean, you'd be much more aware of this than I am, the actual power to create, and that's what I'm concerned about in young children.
There isn't a power to create. I mean, if you, in the media, try and impose an idea on an audience, then you will get no audience. Nobody will watch.
I think we do that with 4- and 5-year-olds. I think it's different. I mean, I think you keep talking about the greater capacity of older children and adolescents to maybe distinguish that. I don't think young children can.
But then, Louise, where I would jump in as being a media studies person myself, and with great respect to what you're saying, because I agree with you, that's what I was saying, we've got to make a distinction between age groups very clearly, because I think this debate often collapses groups altogether. But, you know, as someone with a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old, just to give you an anecdotal example of an area of research that I know about. I mean, with my 7-year-old, when he wanted to go to McDonald's, I didn't say no. We just went occasionally, and eventually, you know, he said, "Mum, the toys are lame and the food sucks," which was the result I wanted. But I helped him negotiate it, and I think that it's not just about expecting that every individual parent will do that, but also our education system needs to kick in. Because is the alternative that we just say there are going to be categories of popular culture that we just completely ban? And my problem with that is, I mean, I don't care because I'm not an advertiser, but if we just did that, how do we do it? How do we go about doing it? It seems impractical to me. I think,
Melinda, is there a way, should we in fact regulate more closely ads that are either selling junk food or things that you four would agree are inappropriate for those very young girls and boys?
Well, the feedback that we're getting is that people feel things have gone too far. There does need to be some limits. There does need to be some reining in of the way the system is operating right now. We would like to see a more independent regulatory body. We'd like to see more input from child health psychiatrists, child development, people who I believe aren't represented on organisations like the ASB and others. There's not enough expert input. I'd like to see some of these ads run by experts in the field to see whether they are appropriate before they go to air, not relying on parents to have to complain and find out how to complain and go through this difficult system that's often not straightforward, but a little bit more vetting and some expert advice beforehand.
And obviously I love experts because otherwise I wouldn't be sitting here in the panel. It's great to kind of get a chance to talk. But we also have to be wary of fetishising expertise. The American Psychological Association until 1971 listed homosexuality as a mental illness.
I'm not fetishising experts. I'm saying, but at least to have one person with some authority in the area
I'm a media
like
studies expert
no,
on
I
the
said
ASB.
child psychiatrist, not media studies. I'm talking about child health
But
experts.
I'm actually an expert in children and media consumption. And one of the things we often get criticised about is, if you are an expert, then what would you know because you're not a normal person? You know, often, I mean, the complaint is often, well, they need more mothers. Well, I'm a mother. We've got a member of the clergy. We've got people... I guess what I'm saying...
Who's the Child Health Authority on the board? Someone with
we've got Tanvir Ahmed, who's a psychiatrist and a Muslim and a male. Yes, he is. He's a resident psychiatrist at RPA. And
in child health psychiatry, or
yes.
But
in
Catherine, can I put it to you that
psychiatry.
Maybe we don't need to argue about the level of expertise, but to see whether or not the standards are reflecting the societal consensus.
Okay.
Because I would put it to you that if Kevin Rudd and John Howard are now addressing this issue, there must be a very large number of parents out there, voters, who are concerned and find this unacceptable. That's the only reason they would talk about it.
But again, there must be an election on too, but you know, if we're talking about this, I guess one of the things I'd say is the problem is the way in which these issues all get collapsed together. This could mean the sexual abuse of children, which is abhorrent and has been epidemic for a very long time and we're only now coming to terms with. You know, does it mean...
No, the specific issue that they were addressing is the sexualisation of young girls.
But I guess what I'm saying is I think that that's code for talking about all these different issues. Because if you're talking about, you know, we're talking even about sexualisation of children in images. Go back to Victorian England, there was a huge amount of pornography and a lot of prostitution of children. This is not a new problem. If the problem is...
No, but we're supposed to be enlightened now.
Yeah,
Catherine,
well,
that's the difference.
But what I'm saying is, let's look at what the real issues are. To me, the issues are children being abused? This is terrible. We know what to do about that. Are young girls having risky sex that exposes them to emotional and physical issues? you know, we know what to do about it. Sex education, contraception, there's a whole range of things that we need to put in place there.
But are you suggesting that these young women become more liberated and more in control of their sexual lives after being saturated with these images from the age of 3 or 4?
No, I think we live in a society in which women have been sexualised in a Western, you know, capitalist, patriarchal society. I think it's axiomatic that we will see sexualised images, increasingly of boys, as well as, you know, of men and women. And what worries me is I think we are sexualising children through a discourse that what makes us worry about DJ's catalogues and things, or, you know, Maya's catalogues.
I mean,
I think we're seeing phantoms.
I would say that anybody who looks at a catalogue that has young girls in it and thinks sexual thoughts, the problem is with that person and not with the catalogue. I mean, I'm interested.
Absolutely.
I'd be interested
some
to
people,
hear.
it probably is their problem, but it becomes a bigger problem.
Yeah.
And I think that
But
we're sending very confusing
create-
messages to people who might be paedophiles in the community.
I really don't think we're sending any kind of messages, confused messages, because paedophiles are the most hated group in Australian society. There's no confusion about that.
On the one hand, we say, make statements like that these people are, you know, sick people who we should despise. On the other hand, we have images that are readily accessible to them, which they can read in a particular way. And we have a popular culture that's fetishising the bodies of very young children.
If that were true,
so I think that's
and if popular culture did provide images that satisfied paedophiles, then they wouldn't need to risk imprisonment by downloading kiddie porn, would they? They'd be satisfied with the catalogue.
I think paedophilia is a bit more...
It begins with one thing and it moves
That
on.
doesn't work.
I mean,
That's actually not true. The research shows that's not true.
Because as a feminist, I feel really strongly about this. You know, like every night, on a Saturday night in any major city in Australia, you'll get young women in mini skirts dancing lewdly and who knows, even drunkenly. They are not sending any message. What they're doing is they're having a good time. And any man who decides that he can rape or assault those women because of how they're dressed or how they appear, you know, he's responsible for his behaviour. And in my view, pedophiles are responsible for their abhorrent behaviour, and I don't think any child can dress or appear in any image in any way that can encourage paedophilia.
Catherine, one of the world's most celebrated feminists, Germaine Greer, described the sexualisation of young girls as sinister and said that anyone who dares to say this is liberating that girl to become a woman really is not seeing what is happening.
Yeah, well, Germaine's work's gone off recently, but, you know, I'm joking. Seriously, can I respond to that? I mean, I think Germaine Greer is radically out of touch with young women, and one of the things that disappoints me, as much as I love her early work, is I think she's prone to making dramatic statements, you know, where she's not engaged with young women. And the one thing I did in my research with teenage girls was listen to them, and when you listen to them, it's a revelation. These are very bright, interesting young women who are a lot savvier on so many levels than I was as a teenager, and it thrills me. And I think Germaine Greer should go and talk to some of them.
This is a chance to listen to some of those young women. Would you please, young women in our audience, let us know what you feel? There is one in the second row there.
Hi. As a person in the industry, the both of us are, the way that you're almost insulting the fact that I could have an eating disorder, which I don't suffer from mental illness. I'm 18 and I started in the industry at 15.
Sorry, which industry?
Modelling and acting and singing. And the way that if kids are in there, one, they need their parents' consent to be in there, and if their parents should be stopping them reading the magazines and buying the bras. I've never seen an ad with an 8-year-old girl running around in a G-string, and because I'm educated and because I know well enough, I would not go into a modelling job and sit in a G-string and suck on a lollipop. So I think the two of you are right in saying it is a matter of education and it is a matter of whether or not the parents are doing the right thing.
And your friend, are you a model as well?
Yeah, I agree with Holly. I think that it should be an education thing. We should be teaching what's right and what's wrong in the community. It's like
just insulting the whole industry as one.
It's like kind of going off topic a bit with the whole junk food thing. We should be teaching people what's right, to eat the right foods or not to dress that way, not to just ban it completely, because when you get 18 and when you get out there, girls can just go wild and they think, you know, alcohol or sex because they haven't been educated correctly.